All right. This is going to be an octopus. Head's going to be up here, and then the body and the tentacles will wrap around this thing in all different manner. Octopus is probably one of the hardest animals that I can do. It is a very difficult process. So I'm going to shape on this thing for a while, and then I'll come back to it when it starts taking shape so you guys can see how this thing happens. Just want you to see this thing in the raw. This is a piece of myrtle wood I got off the beach. Back again here. I've got the basic shape, eyes, okay, and the basic shape of the body. Now don't go too far because you don't know if you've got enough room for all the tentacles. Tentacles, there's 8 tentacles on an octopus. You've got to put them somewhere on this piece. And so they have to go somewhere, okay? Octopus is, I think, one of the absolute hardest animals to carve because there's so much that has to happen to make these things look right. All right, I've got the legs on here now, drawn on. Now I'm going to start removing the material in between of all of these and three-dimensionalizing it. Let's see how this is going here. This one I wrap from the other side over here, all the way around the body. And that takes one out of the way. And then you take off from there. Sometimes I wrap it up around the body. But on a small piece of wood, you got 8 tentacles, 8 arms that have to go on this thing. And so you've really got to plan it out well. You got to have enough space in between everything so you can work these things down and make it a three-dimensional arm. See that? There's the eyes up here. See how this thing's all going to come together. All right, back again here. You can see how I've carved this. There we go. Carved this area out right in here around these tentacle. And now I'm going to come down through here and show you how I do that. This is a stipple tool that they've come out with. Typhoons, I'm going to call them all kinds of things. But this is an awesome tool that works really well. Low speed too, you don't need a lot of speed. Maybe a little bit more. Just follow right along that black line right there. You want to go quite deep. So you want this to be three-dimensional. So you want to, it's like a finger. So what you're trying to do, just straight down. Leave that black line behind. You only go so far, so stop before you go too far. I like leaving a natural edge around the bottom of these if you can. Sometimes you don't have room, so you just got to go for it. I like that natural edge. Back again. Show you now these are just squared off. Okay. See how this thing turned out. Try to adjust this camera a little bit. You see they're quite deep. because you want this thing to look three-dimensional when you're done. So you have to go deep. Okay, now you start rounding all these off. Kind of, they'll look like they'll look rounded off, but don't go too far right now. What you want to do now is plan out how you want your suckers to go to end up, either facing out or wrapping down around, and I'll show you that process as I go, how I do that. And so I've started rounding it off here already and bringing this out. This one wraps all the way around the head, comes out here. Further into this piece, I'm going to show you, you got the raw piece coming down here, still straight up and down. This one too, no real declaration except for it's there and haven't come around the inside cuts or anything. But here we've got, this is coming into it and quite a bit further into it. Before the suckers, what I've done, like this one here, it comes down off from here, and right here is where it intercepts with the suckers. And that's going to come out to a flat. And that flat curves around and it cuts back, and it's probably going to sink back into it there. I haven't really totally decided, but you got to make this flat. And that's where you put your suckers. Okay, this one, same way. Sucker's going to start out here from underneath, come up, wrap into the piece, and then come back down, and probably end up all the way to the end on this one. This one's the same way. The suckers are going to come down. Start out right here, come flat out onto it, and go full length to the end. Okay, this one hasn't been done yet, so that gives you the difference. Just a lot more declaration of the tentacles, more round, more three-dimensional. And so I'll come back to this when I get ready to do the suckers on here and show you a pre-shot before I do start putting the suckers on. So a lot to these octopus. Octopus has a main brain and a brain for every single one of the tentacles, so you gotta go there. Tentacles are very difficult, very time-consuming, very mathematical, going from big to small to tiny to the end, and then three-dimensionalized on each one too. So you have to make each tentacle, and then make each sucker, individual sucker coming down. Either whether it comes in contact with the stone or the coral or whatever it is. And then when they appear fully, all the way, you got to make each sucker. You know, you can't not put suckers on it. So it's an octopus. I'll show you how to do the eyes and the breathing tubes that go in this area. You can see I've put some suckers on here with my spin tool. It's this tool right here. It's chipped out on the side, but that actually helps. But this tool is one of the tools. Here's another one that you're going to have to make. And that puts that mark in there. I'm going to show you one part of this other spot here. I guess right there I can put a couple. You got to gradually go down smaller as you go. And so I'm going to do one, some of them right in here. So it starts out with right there. It just burns that shape right in there with the spin tool. And you got to alternate these. Yeah. Put one more. You got to leave a little space in between because you're going to take all this material out. All this material is going to go out. So these suckers come out from the wood, and then you go back behind them and make a sucker out of that. I'll show you how to do that. I'm going to change this tool out right now. Put in a smaller tool. But the same type of tool. Okay. Alternate these going down here. Don't put them side by side. You get into way too much trouble by trying to do that. And there's all kinds of octopus out there. Some of them have just one row going down. Some of them have alternated rows. Some of them have dual rows, side by side. There's just all a variation of suckers. You see how I'm doing this? Just alternate. Leave yourself some space. Don't get too pinched. You got a lot of work you got to do these things to make these things work and look good. And don't go all the way down with this size, because you have to graduate size all the way down. So we're going to go right here. And this is a transition from the suckers being underneath of the arm to on top. And all these are going to end up on top. All these are going to end up on top. Okay. And just alternate them down. You can try measuring them if you want, but I'd rather have a broken pattern where it's not measured, it's not the same, because the suckers are not the same. You look at the suckers on a octopus, they look like they're spaced the same and everything, but they're not. They're not. They're all different. Every one of them are different going down that. Look at that. See, that goes all the way up on the top. Some of them start out with just one. Some of them start out really small. Some of them start out really big. That's because they get bit off and they have to regenerate. An octopus has 9 brains. 1 brain for each miniature brain for each tentacle, and a main brain to operate all of the other 8 and the organs within. 1 more, and then stop. These should have been smaller ones, but they'll be all right. I can make them smaller as I go. I'm just going to do a couple here, and then drop to a smaller size. Ow. Okay, we're going to transition to a smaller one. All right, we're going to transition one more time to a smaller one. Alright, that's all 8 tentacles. Now we're going to go to even a smaller one. And here we can quite a bit smaller. Still got to give yourself some space though. You can go smaller if you want, but you're getting into some problems when you do. Don't go all the way to the end. Give yourself some space. That might be all 8 tentacles. I'm going to show you how to make these suckers 3-dimensional. Now you take away all the material around the outside of them, you have a 3-dimensional sucker. I'm going to use a carbide round burr. And here we go. Don't worry about clipping the sucker. Now what I want you to do is dive down. Stay away from the sucker at that black line. Just stay away from it. You can always go up to it later. You're going to remove all this material anyway.
Just take that and get rid of that stuff. Roll that right down there and end up with this lip. It's kind of the dividing line between the actual sucker and the tentacle it's attached to. See how I'm going right down underneath of that. Go around. Just go nice and slow. It's a very tedious, slow process. Not only that, then you got to make it into a cup. And you do that by doing this. I'm going to bring this down a little bit more on this other side. Do the cup last. Otherwise, if you screw up and take off too much on the outside, now you got a problem. There's ways to fix it, but it's a pain. There's actually a little tiny hole go down into that too. I'll show you that later. As you can see, yeah, the sucker's got a hole in each one of them as well. It's a cup. And so you're making that cup. And this is why you have to leave the sucker or the tentacle quite thick, because you take a lot of material away to make that sucker happen. Less and less as you travel down it and get smaller and smaller, but still, your material gets eaten away. You can have an awful thin looking arms if you don't leave enough substance behind to create the suckers. Okay, we're going to come back to this in a later date and show you how this works. I've taken this quite a bit further to the sucker side. I've undercut all my suckers, but what I'm doing right now is getting rid of the roundness of these, flattening them out before I do the impression of the actual sucker. Just easier to do it that way. Otherwise, you're running around on the top of a round surface with your ball trying to make that sucker. And so this just makes it easier. I do that with a deal like this. You can find them on the internet. Sanding drum. Keep your speed down low. And go slow. And just knock that top off and down. Flatten that spot out on the top of there. It'll be easier to see where you want to go for one thing, and show the imperfections of the sucker as you go. They should be perfectly round, or as round as you can make them. No such thing as perfect. Anyway, knock these tops off and all these guys. Like that. I've gotten quite a few of them done already. I just wanted to show you this process. It makes it a lot easier to make the sucker into a sucker. Especially when they're small. You don't have much room for error when they're tiny like that. When you get out to the end of the tentacle. You gotta be careful. You gotta go real slow on these guys. Almost do one at a time, because if you don't, you have you can chip them right off, and then you gotta replace it. That's a real problem. I had a couple of them break off on this. You always do. It's just the way it is. And I replaced them with the Purple Heart. Little Purple Heart guy right there. There's two of them on here. Had to replace. There's always a couple of them that break off. But you gotta use hardwood for projects like this because soft wood is just too soft. Alright, I think I got them all. What I'm going to do now is start the actual sucker project. Start out with these little guys. Get your magnifying glasses on. And just push down on the top of that. If there's any imperfection, you can correct it as you go. Just touch it. You don't want to go down too far because you've undercut most of these. So if you take it past the undercut, then you're reducing the size of your sucker. And you want to maintain size. Real nice and easy. Some of them will chip away a little bit when they're small. Alright, from this point on it gets pretty boring. Showed you how to do that. And, like I said, octopus are very difficult to do. If you take one of these bad boys on, you better be prepared to put some time in. There's still a whole bunch of stuff I got to do to this thing to make it look good. And so I got to reduce these areas further and bring more three-dimensionalism to each arm and maybe undercut and go all the way through like I did here and here and there. So still lots of work to do on this guy, or girl actually. And so I will come back at a later time and show you another process of this thing. Have a good one. Okay, I'm back again here. My magnifying glass thingy's on. Now, there is a center hole that you have to put in these suckers. I've already started doing them. And I'm using electric soldering iron carved down to a real tight point. And because if you use a spin tool, especially with the small ones, you can destroy the sucker that you work so hard on to make. Each one's got a little center hole. And so it doesn't have to be very deep. And because you're using the soldering iron, electric soldering iron, it's about 900 degrees. Give or take a couple. And you just find the center. Put a little tiny hole right in the center. This is one of the last things. You can go back through and shape a little bit more if you want to, but all right, you get the idea. I'll come back to it when I start finishing the shape of these tentacles up. I'll have to go deeper underneath some more of them and to bring them out more, make them more three-dimensional. And then this piece is getting close to being finished, though. Another couple of days and it'll be done. So I'll come back to it later time. Later, dudes.